بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما، وأصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. Tonight is the 17th of Jumada Thani, 1442, which coincides with the 31st of December, which is the last day of 2020. And this was not really prepared. I just had some thoughts in my mind that I felt that I wanted to just share as a means of reflection and inshallah ta'ala benefit for all of us. And that is, as this Gregorian calendar year comes to an end, each and every one of us that are watching this or will watch this afterwards, everybody can relate to the fact that this year has been a year that will not be forgotten in a very, very long time. And every single one of us have different experiences as to some of the things that we had to deal with this year. Whether it was the pandemic that really changed the scale of how we do our regular daily activities, right? Not being able to interact socially with many people, that many of our friends and at our local communities and in our masajid, and some of the things that we have normalized doing throughout our lives, we can't really do anymore because of just the nature of how things have become with the COVID. And the loss of life, many people dying from COVID, many people dying in general, the amount of people we've lost this year, the amount of scholars we've lost this year. It's been a tremendous year overall. It's definitely been a year not to forget. People lost their jobs. People had to, readjust their whole way of making money. Schooling, so many things on so many levels have changed just due to the reality of 2020. And a lot can be mentioned about that, a lot can be reflected about that, and I'm sure each and every one of us have our own points to reflect upon, but I just want to mention a few things. And firstly, and the most important of that is, as Muslims, it's important that we are always content and pleased with the qadr of Allah. And that is a part and parcel of our foundation as Muslims. That whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained, we are pleased with. And we say and do nothing that, goes against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His actions and His will. We don't say anything that shows any type of displeasure with regards to the qadr of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Right? And as you scroll through social media and, this year comes to an end, you see a lot of people, for the most part, it's out of ignorance, insulting the year and insulting the things that have happened. And, without even realizing, when we insult the time, or we say, death to 2020 or cancel 2020 or, and all of the things that come along with that, we have to come to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained everything that has happened and that will happen 50,000 years before we were created. So, as once we understand that concept, then we should be, content and pleased with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained. And as Muslims, that's a huge part of our faith. And that whenever we face difficulties, that we'll be patient, which we'll speak about inshallah briefly. So I wanted to say that off the bat, number one, the importance of realizing that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed to happen will happen. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not ordained to happen will never happen. And we are, pleased, and we don't say anything except that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second and last point which I'll mention, I'm not going to make this too long, and this is really a reflection for myself first, and inshallah will be beneficial for all of us, is that what we experienced this year and what we have seen this year is a snapshot of the reality of this dunya. It's a glimpse that we have been shown of the reality of this dunya that we're living in. That this dunya is temporary, that this world is not going to last forever, that everything that we experience in the dunya is not just happiness and good times, that we will face difficulty and we will face adversity. And that's just the sunnah of the dunya. That's just the way the world is. That's the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make the dunya similar to the afterlife. Eternal bliss is in Jannah. Eternal happiness is in paradise. It's not meant for the dunya. The dunya and the nature of the dunya is sometimes we'll have good times and sometimes we'll have difficult times. Nothing is forever. Nothing is guaranteed. Right? And we've clearly seen that in so many occasions of events and things that have taken place throughout this year. So I think when we understand that this dunya is temporary and what we are striving for and achieving for is the afterlife, I think the events of what took place throughout this year is definitely an indication of that. And for us, it should be a point of reflection to say, wow, this is the dunya, right? And our minds should be shifted and focused towards striving for the afterlife and not being distracted for this temporary, this temporary dunya that you can have it and at one time it can go. You can have all the money, you can have the nice cars, you can have the nice homes, you can have everything, and everything that will make you happy in terms of your worldly, stature and reality, and it can all just go like that. People losing their lives, people losing their livelihood, people losing their money. It just happens like that. Virus here, earthquake there, fire here, one small thing that can just take everything and completely get rid of everything. But the question that we ask ourselves is, we have to have that perspective of what is the goal here. If the goal is dunya, then those things taking place will really be backbreaking for the person. But if the goal is akhirah, and they understand that this worldly life is just a means, and they understand what the reality of this dunya is, then yes, it will be difficult when a person goes through difficulty quite naturally, but they'll be patient and they'll understand how to be resilient because there's an overall objective. There's a goal to be achieved here, right? So I honestly think, and this is a reflection for myself, that what's been happening this year is really a snapshot of what the reality of this dunya is. And once we realize that, the question is, how should we as Muslims be when it comes to our understanding of how we should look at the dunya, number one, and also how we should look at this, this reality of sometimes there's going to be difficult times and sometimes there's going to be times of ease. How as Muslims should we be when it comes to dealing with these two circumstances? And what is the reality of these two circumstances, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions specifically in the Quran that this dunya is a test. Us being alive in this dunya is an ibtila. It's a test. The good times that we go through is an ibtila. The bad times and the tough times that we go through is an ibtila. They're both exams. We're being examined. لِيَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ, to see what is it they're going to do. How are you going to be and how am I going to be in times of ease versus how am I going to be in times of difficulty? It is an ikhtibar and an imtihan and an ibtila. It is an exam. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even in the Quran tells us and explains to us how the believers are versus how the disbelievers are, as well as in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you look at the disbelievers, how are they when they're in times of difficulty versus times of ease? As well as those who their iman is low. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِي. The human being, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them, look at the terms Allah is using. Ibtila. When Allah tests them, how does Allah test them and try them? أَكْرَمَهُ. Allah honors them. وَنَعَّمَهُ. Allah blesses them and gives them ni'am. And as a result, they say, Rabbi akramani, my Lord has honored me. But on the flip side, إِذَا مَبْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِي. On the flip side, when they're tested with difficulty, Huh? They lose some money, they lose their job, they become sick, they get COVID, they whatever might happen. What happens all of a sudden? What is their response and their reaction? Instead of being, are they patient? Are they trying to deal with their difficulty? No, they say, Rabbi ahanani, Allah has humiliated me. That's the nature of human beings. But the one who has iman, his circumstances is different. And the Prophet ﷺ described that for us. He says ﷺ in the hadith, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. Right? Amazing is the affair of the believer. Every circumstance and every situation the believer is in, it's good. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. And this is specific for the believer. No one else is like this except for the mu'min. In أَصَابَهُ سَرَّاء, when he's granted a situation of ease, شَكَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. He's grateful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. He's grateful, and that is good and khair for him. وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ ضَرَّاء. But when he is going through a difficulty and a hard time, he's patient, صَبَر فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. That's the believer. The believer is patient through difficulty, and the believer is grateful in times of ease. So going through this year, some of us, maybe, we went through a difficult time. We tested positive for COVID, or we lost a job, or we be patient, because the dunya is like that. We're going to go through hardship. But after that difficulty that we'll go through, there will be ease, Allah in the Quran says. Whether that ease comes in this dunya, which is not necessarily guaranteed, but in the afterlife, for the one who is obedient to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala and follows the book of Allah and the sunnah and does what he's supposed to do, that ease will definitely come for him in the afterlife, or her in the afterlife, without any doubt. Right? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَانَتْ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ نُزُلًا. Those who have iman and do righteous deeds, Jannah is prepared for them. Al-Firdaus. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the inhabitants. So that's what the believer understands that. So 2020 has now come to an end. We're coming to a new year. We're no doubt going to face difficulties, because that's just the reality of the dunya. How should we be when tough times come? We're patient. We don't become ungrateful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. We're in fact grateful for, potentially not being in more difficult situations. Because no matter how bad it is for us, there's always somebody else is going to have it worse. There's always somebody else is going to have it even worse. So we should look at those who are beneath us and be grateful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala that we're not in that hal, and we're not in that condition, and we're not in that situation. And when times of ease come, then we are also thankful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. But many times what happens is, when times of ease comes, people forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And people get distracted with the dunya. And we see this from the stories of the ummahs and the nations before. That's why we're taught to, read the Quran so we can reflect. We read the stories of the people of the past so that we reflect. When some of the nations, they'll have a good time, they'll forget about Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. But the moment they go through some type of hardship, here they are trying to come back to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So let us be from those who, when we're dealing with adversity, which is going to happen, وَلَا يعني لا محالة, without any doubt it's going to happen, then when it's difficulty, we're patient. And an even higher level than being patient is being grateful and being thankful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And in times of ease, we're grateful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and we keep on pushing, in serving Him and being obedient to Him. That's just some reflections that I had that was running through my mind with regards to, as this year wrapped up and came to an end. And a lot can be said. A lot can be said, and I'm sure each and every one of you, and I recommend and urge you guys to do that, to sit and, reflect and think about how things have been this year, and the lessons that you could take away from what you have experienced and witnessed throughout this year. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to allow us to stay firm on His religion, and and give us success in continuing to do khair in the upcoming days. Right? We only have several months until Ramadan is here again. Right? This is something that we should have hope for, and we should be happy about. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to reach the month of Ramadan, to allow us to give us another opportunity to fast in the month of Ramadan. Right? We should be grateful that we have opportunities now. We're still alive. Many people have already died and passed away. Right? We have an opportunity now to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek His forgiveness. Let's not ignore all of those things, and be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be thankful to Him tabaraka wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us firm, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us of all of our shortcomings. I just wanted to, remind myself and remind my fellow brothers and sisters out there, and I'm sure a lot better, many things that are even better than what I said could be said. لكن we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us. هذا والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.